Hey guys, Alfred here with Knox Craft Reviews. We got another truck to review for you guys today. I'm excited to showcase this one off. It originally started off with an idea from my wife who wanted to move on from a Bronco Sport to more of a pickup truck. So here we are testing out the new 2026 Ford Ranger XLT. So in the same scenario that she's in is kind of a similar scenario for other people who enjoy pickup trucks or using them for work or play or what have you. Her move, or what she's considering to move to, it would be the equivalent of moving to like a Ford Maverick to a Ford Ranger. Now we're just looking at this from a lens of just the Ranger itself. We're not really looking at it from the lens of moving up from the other, but I can tell you that she has already said a couple times that the it's a lot more comfortable, it's a lot taller off the ground, and the sight lines are quite a significant improvement from the Bronco Sport. From a rideability aspect, it is quite different. For somebody who's used to a truck, it feels more like a truck, whereas a Maverick feels more like an SUV. So we're going to showcase this a little bit more. From a drivability perspective, it handles more like a like a typical truck. It's not as heavy as a 1-ton. It can't tow as much as a 1-ton, but it's kind of that smaller ground area, similar to like a Toyota Tacoma or something along those lines. Very similar suspension to a Toyota Tacoma or even a Nissan Frontier. It has the independent front suspension and a live axle in the rear with leaf springs. So in terms of suspension components down the road, if you were ever to go, say, overlanding or off-roading with something like this, it gives you a lot to play with. There's a lot of options in the aftermarket for this, so keep that in mind if you're looking at one of these, whether it's the base model, XL, STX, all the way up to the Lariat model. They're very versatile in terms of suspension upgradability. Interior wise, it is quite comfortable. You're not sitting on the floor like you would in the Bronco Sport or the Maverick. It's a lot taller, it has a lot more height control, which is awesome. The headroom is also significantly better. It's a little bit more rounded, so it means that you have a little bit more room to, if you're a bit taller. It's also nice, this model is not equipped with the sunroof, so our head space is actually a little bit greater than it would be if we had that. This is the XLT package, so it has your standard cloth seats with the nice patterns. They are heated, but this would be kind of like the higher end version of kind of like a base model pickup truck. So getting back to the interior, you still have your auto lights, which are awesome. You still have some of the safety features. This truck has the blind spot detection system. It does also seem to have your basic lane departure, and it has a little bit for the cruise control. It's not adaptive, but honestly that's not a bad thing to ask, because now we have less sensors in the windows, so if you ever have to replace the windshield, now you're not going to be paying $5,000 or $3,000. You're just paying $1,000 for the one, so that's nice. You have a nice display for the dash, which is awesome. This is a significant improvement from the previous models. If you're used to the old school, it's got little bars. It's quite a small screen LCD, but this one kind of, it's very similar to like a full-size Bronco, which is pretty cool. You have a little bit more information at the ready. This one also has the equipped drive modes that we like seeing in all of our trucks. It's got the sport mode, it's got the tow mode, it's got slippery mode, it's got normal mode, eco mode. Basically all the main pieces that you need, which is nice. It's not a dial a shift, which is nice. You still have a handle to grab to. They haven't quite done that with these, you know, smaller mid-sized trucks quite yet. They do it with the Maverick, but they haven't done it with the Ranger, so it still feels like a truck, which is great. Switching into the 2026 version, I know a year or two ago they did upgrade to the bigger LCD screen or LED screen for the center, which is awesome. The only thing that I'm not crazy about with these style screens is you have less buttons for AC and your temperature controls. They still give you the gauges and the dials, which is nice. There's a lot of brands that are incorporating everything into the screen, which we don't like. Ford's done a good job of mixing it up with dial and knobs, but also having some of your on-screen controls, like where you're sending that air, like to your feet, to your arms, or to your to the front windshield as well, which is great. And then having that LCD screen, or that large LED screen, you know, you have, when you're using Apple CarPlay or any navigational tools, you got a bigger map, you got a bit bigger information. It feels like, you know, more of an elegant truck. Again, this is just an XLT and it already feels like a higher level truck, so I really appreciate some of the advanced infotainment system and electronic systems that are in this truck. So going back into passenger and people accommodations here, the back seat is quite small. One thing I have noticed is, and this is typical of all mid-sized trucks, they're all kind of famous for this, it's, you know, you're trying to get the smallest truck possible. People still want crew cabs of these trucks. It's really hard to accommodate backseat passengers and kids and everything else in these kind of trucks when you're at this size. When you get to the full size, that's the difference. However, Ford has done a decent job, you know, fitting people in the back seat. As you can see in the photo or in the video here, there is a decent amount of legroom for people. You're gonna sit, you know, at least 4 adults comfortably-ish. It's gonna be tight. People might have to move up a little bit. The other thing too is they are significantly smaller, so if you were gonna try to fit 5 people in these trucks, it'll be really tight. You can do it, but it's tight. So that's just one thing to keep in mind if you're looking at like a mid-size truck to a full-size truck. The truck part of the truck, the box. These trucks have a very reasonable amount of payload and towing for a mid-size truck. I've always been impressed with the way that the North American market has dealt with these mid-size trucks, and they're super versatile. One thing that you'll kind of consider if you're using it as a play truck, I mean, or a truck, you know, you're gonna have your fitted tonneau covers, toolboxes, those kind of things. It's simple accommodation for that. However, beds are getting complicated, and so are the accessories. You're gonna want to start putting racks. You're gonna put canopies, put service canopies on these things. It's gonna get complicated. You want to make sure that the reinforcement on the box sides are gonna be able to do this. This truck does a decent job with that. They seem to have a lot of cubby holes in places for mounts, something that I don't typically see on a lot of these mid-sized trucks. So Ford, being a typical truck in the work world, they've done a good job at incorporating the box so that it's still usable from a work perspective. Yeah, so you got an outlet for your truck here. You also got a couple clamps and tie down positions, and other things like clamps on the top, headache racks, those sorts of things should be fairly easy to accommodate on a box, and the way that this truck's laid out in the box. The couple things I'll show you on these Fords that I absolutely love. If you're a contractor, it's not a big deal, but it's really cool to have your measurements on the tailgate. You can use your tailgate as a little bit of a mini workbench. One thing I also liked, and this is something that I also really enjoyed on my F350 Tremor, which is these holes here, so you can put clamps down. So if you're trying to bolt something or screw something or cut something, you have those places for your C-clamp for working. So kudos to Ford for coming up with some good solutions and keeping, you know, the work truck a work truck. So performance and the engine and serviceability, which are all very important factors when looking at a new truck. So starting off with the performance, I'm not going to bore you with the horsepower numbers and the torque numbers because there's a lot of in-depth reviewers that'll go into those details. This particular truck that we're test driving today is the 2.7 liter twin turbo V6 model. And yeah, I've looked into the engine bay and we have two turbos, one here and one here, which is great. Not compounding, but at least each exhaust port has its own turbo, which is great. But otherwise, you know, it seems like a peppy truck. It's a heavy truck. It's got a live axle in the rear. Like, it takes a lot to transfer all that power to, you know, your outer tires. So that happens. But honestly, off the line, it picks up. It's not as sluggish as an F-150, and you know, not as powerful as the F-350. But it's like that perfect mid-rise. It's not a slouch by any means. It'll keep up with your traffic on the highway just as well as the slow traffic on the FSRs. So, all things considered, the problem with new vehicles nowadays, and for people that like to DIY things like myself, especially if you're, you know, running businesses and you're trying to keep your bottom dollar as low as you possibly can with these things, it's important to notice that these vehicles are getting more and more complicated every year. There's more pipes, there's more sensors, there's more routing, there's more cooling, and there's more emissions equipment. Now, being a V6 and a typical Ford style, they're high efficiency motors, which means more sensors and a lot more movement of things like air, coolant, and those types of things. So when you open up the engine bay of something like this, you immediately don't recognize the old V8 from 1970s or 1980, but they aren't super complicated. In fact, a lot of the work that I've noticed on this truck can be done on the top end. It looks like we have things like an oil filter that's accessible from the top. You have your dipstick, which is nice, and then you still have your pans and everything down below. Now, by the looks of it, it looks like it's tricky with the cross member and doing like the actual oil change part. So that's one thing that I'm not crazy about with these trucks, but it depends on what you're going to do. If you're going to get a newer truck and you're just going to get the shop to do it, or if you're one of the great things that I love about Ford, if you have the Ford Maintenance Protection Plan, the FMPP, then you know, you're just taking it to the shop for those years and it's not a big deal. You just let the Ford Tech handle it. You can still do things like basic maintenance. It just take you a little bit more time the first time you do it, but it's not overly complicated. And I still like the fact that Ford still gives you analog options for things like oil dipsticks and transmission dipsticks are slowly going away. This one does not have a transmission dipstick, which is slightly disappointing, but I mean, the amount of times that you're going to have to do an interval for an automatic transmission fluid change, it's not like it's going to go for like, you know, 300,000 kilometers before you change it out. So you're going to see the fluid levels, and the truck's probably going to warn you at the same time. But at least you can do your own oil change and know where things are at. So that's pretty important, and I commend Ford for that. All right, my personal hot take on this truck and where it stands and who it's built for. So we've got an XLT here. It's not the top of the line. It's not a Lariat. It's not the Raptor edition. So I mean, keep that in mind. But if you're looking for a truck for work that gets you to and from the city, doesn't act like a unibody vehicle where it's loud, like you get a lot of road noise coming through the body. You want like a live suspension, leaf springs, so you can actually have like a decent payload, decent suspension. This is a really good work truck for the midsize. If you work in the city or in tight spaces, you need something smaller. This truck's absolutely perfect. My wife will probably speak to it as well, but she immediately noticed how visible and how easy it was to drive. Mavericks or the Bronco Sports being a little bit more square, it feels wider, it feels a bit bigger than it is. This thing, you're taller off the ground, you're more in a conventional truck. Your sight lines are a lot better. You can park it easier, you can get where you need to be. One thing I will notice with the XLT, you don't get the front camera, so you still have to kind of figure out where your nose is when you go. It's a small area. It's not as big as like a half ton or a 1 ton, so you don't necessarily have to worry about that. But in terms of versatility, like you're gonna get to and from the job site, or better yet, if you want to take these things off-road and you're trying to stay away from the Japanese market and you want to go with something that's North American, this is great. It still has a lot of the off-road capability that you're looking for. One thing that I would note though, if you're going to do off-roading with this truck, and this is a common issue that I've seen with some friends who had newer Rangers, a clear warning that this has a plastic transmission pan. You're going to want it, the way that it's positioned, it is covered like you're within the frame rails if you were to, you know, belly scrape on an obstacle. But I would recommend still to maybe consider getting any sort of skid plate to cover that area. It's not so much a worrisome thing for rocks and obstacles that are hard. It's the sticks, the logs, little things that are going to stick up that the frame rails are not necessarily going to capture, and all of a sudden now you got no transmission fluid and you're stuck in the middle of the woods. So that's one thing I would definitely consider for sure. And the skid plate, at least for the XLT model here, for the gas can or the gas tank, is also made of plastic. So again, off-road heavy, finding obstacles that you're climbing over, investing in armor would be one of the first things I would probably look at doing for these trucks. But other than that, it's not too bad. You know, between the maintenance plans, Ford's reliability, it's a decent truck for what it is. It'll get you where you need to go. I would definitely say that this would be more suited for like a contractor. I would argue that there's probably still a few better off-roading options out there, like the TRD off-road line from Toyota. But if you are looking at a Ranger, maybe consider the Ranger Raptor, which we've yet to test drive. So again, there's definitely options. It depends on the build that you want to go. But for contracting, for just getting out there, for FSRs, for just a small, practical family truck to get you to and from the grocery store, and just to park in these damn small parking spots that we have nowadays, this truck will do you really well. And typical true Ford fashion, we're happy to test drive them. So yeah. Moving from the Bronco Sport to this Ranger, what are your first impressions?
Well, I love it. I like how the hood, it kind of angles down a bit, whereas my Bronco Sport, it's just like straight. So it's kind of hard to tell where you are in the lines. And because you're sitting up higher, I notice the mirrors, like when I'm backing up, I don't have to tilt my mirrors down to see where the lines are. I can just see right from where I'm sitting, and it makes all the difference.
Can you tell me anything else you like about the truck?
Well, I do like the bigger screen. I know like a lot of people like the smaller screen sometimes, and you know that the buttons, some of them are in the screen to change. I don't mind that personally. I like the bigger screen. I love how this has the bigger engine, the V6, because I had the Explorer ST, which was a V6 twin turbo performance vehicle. So this feels like just kind of a step down from it. Like my Bronco Sport, he's peppy. I love him. He's great. Put him in sport mode, I'm gone. But for this truck, it feels like, you know, I don't quite miss the Explorer as much as I do, the speed-wise anyways, as I do with the Bronco Sport. With this, it feels like I kind of never got rid of it, you know what I mean? But like, I like the headroom, the back seat, there's so much more room. I feel like getting car seats into this versus the Bronco Sport would be a lot easier from what I've heard. But other than that, I'm thinking, you know, hun, we might be trading in the Bronco Sport here really soon.
You heard that first. We might have a new payment on our hands. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we will catch you in the next interview. So one thing I'd like to do before we take off here is to make a shout out to our friends at Chilliwack Ford, specifically Andrew. We bought a lot of vehicles from them, and this particular truck that we're test driving today, we're thankful enough for them to give us the opportunity to test drive this truck. So this truck is available, and I will share those details here shortly.